All right, let's be honest. Picture this. You're out on the water, it's a bit windy, and you round a point to see a shoreline that's just gross. The water is the color of chocolate milk, there's debris floating around, and it looks completely dead. What's your first instinct? If you're like 99% of anglers, you immediately turn the boat and head for clearer, fishier-looking water. But what if I told you that by running away from that ugly, muddy mess, you are actively running away from the biggest, most aggressive walleye in the entire lake? Today, we're not just going to look at those spots, we're going to dissect why they are absolute magnets for trophy-class fish right now. You're about to learn why your gut instinct is costing you fish, and how to turn the ugliest spot on the lake into your personal honey hole. So let me ask you this right now, and I want you to be honest in the comments. Do you believe big walleye feed in water so dirty they can't possibly see their prey? Let's get into it. For generations, we've been taught a certain gospel of fishing. It's the old wisdom you hear from your grandpa, from the guys at the bait shop, from 1,000 fishing shows. The rules are simple. Find clear water, find structure, look for those classic rocky points and deep weed lines. And there's a reason for that. Those spots absolutely hold fish at certain times of the year. It's comfortable. It makes sense to our human brains. We want to see what we're fishing. We want to believe the fish need to see what they're eating. So we spend hundreds, even thousands of dollars on high-definition, side-imaging sonars to find that perfect, picturesque underwater landscape. The muddy, wind-blown shoreline doesn't fit that picture. It's chaotic, it's messy, and our electronics can't even read the bottom properly there. So we write it off, we label it dead water, and we ignore it year after year, sticking to what we know. But nature doesn't follow our neat and tidy rules, and the biggest predators are masters of using chaos to their advantage. That comfort zone we all love to fish in? It's exactly why so many people miss out on the best bites of the season. Let's start with the most basic element, temperature. Why is that muddy water such a fish magnet? It all comes down to a few degrees. Imagine a sunny day, even a partly cloudy one, in the spring or early summer. That muddy water is full of suspended particles, right? Dirt, silt, algae. Each one of those tiny particles absorbs solar radiation, basically acting like a million little heat collectors. Clear water, on the other hand, lets that sunlight penetrate deep, but it doesn't hold the heat at the surface as efficiently. The result is that this ugly, shallow, muddy water can be 2, 3, even 5 degrees warmer than the main lake. To you and me, that's nothing. But to a cold-blooded walleye, that's like stepping into a warm, cozy living room after being outside in the cold. This slight temperature increase is a massive biological trigger. It ramps up their metabolism, makes them more active, and puts them in the mood to feed aggressively. You're not just fishing muddy water, you're fishing the warmest, most comfortable water in the lake, and every creature in the ecosystem knows it. Now let's talk about the buffet. Why are the walleye there? Because that's where the food is. That temperature difference we just talked about doesn't just attract predators, it kickstarts the entire food chain. The warmth and sunlight penetrating the shallow, stained water cause a bloom of phytoplankton and zooplankton. This is the base of the pyramid, the food for the smallest organisms. What eats that plankton? Baitfish, minnows, shiners, young of the year perch. They all pour into these warm, soupy shallows to feast on this sudden explosion of food. They feel safe there. The cloudy water gives them cover from birds of prey above and, they think, from predators below. So you have this massive concentration of baitfish all balled up in a shallow, confined area. For a trophy walleye, this is the equivalent of an all-you-can-eat buffet setting up right in their living room. They don't have to waste energy chasing down a stray minnow over a deep flat. They can just move in, sit in the murky chaos, and wait for an endless parade of meals to swim right past their face. They are there for one reason, and one reason only: to eat. So, here's the big question everyone asks. How can a walleye, a famously site-dependent predator, possibly hunt in water where it can't see its own nose? This is where we debunk a huge myth. We think of walleye as seeing, with just their eyes, but that's a human way of thinking. A walleye's secret weapon, the thing that makes it such an incredible predator, is its lateral line. Think of it as a full-body sonar system. It's a series of sensitive nerve endings that run down the length of the fish's body, detecting the tiniest vibrations and changes in water pressure. In that muddy, wind-churned water, a frantic, struggling baitfish sends out a huge, unmistakable signal. A crankbait with a wide, thumping wobble sends out a dinner bell that a walleye can feel from yards away. They don't need to see the bait. They feel it. They sense its location, its speed, its direction. The murky water that you see as a disadvantage is actually their ultimate advantage. It conceals them from their prey, allowing them to get incredibly close before striking, guided entirely by this amazing sense of feel. Let's stick with their senses and bust another myth, the idea that walleye vision is useless in dirty water. It's not useless, it just works differently than we assume. A walleye's eye is a masterpiece of low-light engineering. Behind their retina is a layer of cells called the tapetum lucidum. This is the same thing that makes a cat's eyes glow in the dark. It acts like a mirror, bouncing any available light back through the retina a second time, essentially amplifying the light. So even in what looks like pitch-black, muddy water to us, a walleye can still pick up shadows, shapes, and flashes of color much better than you'd think. They might not be able to read the fine print on your lure, but they can absolutely detect the silhouette of a crankbait or the flash of a paddle tail swimming by. When you combine this incredible low-light vision with their hypersensitive lateral line, you don't have a handicapped hunter. You have a perfectly adapted killing machine designed by nature to thrive in exactly these ugly conditions that most anglers run from. Let's talk about your new best friend on the water, the wind. Most fishermen hate the wind. It makes boat control difficult, it makes casting a pain, and it churns everything up. But for this pattern, wind is not just helpful, it is absolutely essential. You need to stop thinking of wind as an inconvenience and start thinking of it as a giant, flashing neon sign that says, "Fish here." A sustained wind blowing into a shoreline does several things. First, it pushes that warm surface water we talked about and stacks it up against the bank, concentrating the heat. Second, it creates a current. This current disorients baitfish and pushes them into predictable locations along the shore. Third, and most importantly, it creates the mud line by churning up the bottom. This wave action is constantly stirring up sediment, releasing nutrients, and creating that cloudy water that provides the perfect ambush cover for walleyes. A calm, slick day is the worst thing for this bite. If you pull up to your spot and there's no wind, don't even bother. You are looking for a shoreline that is getting pounded by the wind. The stronger the better, within reason. The wind is the engine that drives this entire pattern. Now it's not enough to just find a muddy bank. The real pros know how to read the water and find the sweet spot. I'm talking about the seam or the mud line. Rarely is the water uniformly dirty. As the wind and waves churn up the shallows, that muddy water pushes out and meets the cleaner water of the main lake. This creates a distinct transition line. You can literally see it, a hard edge between brown water and green water. This seam is a fish highway. Think of it like a weed edge, but made of water clarity. Baitfish will often hang right on the edge of the mud for cover, darting out into the clearer water to feed. Walleyes will use this same edge as a perfect ambush point. They can sit in the cover of the mud, completely hidden, and watch the cleaner water for any unsuspecting prey to swim by. Don't just blindly cast into the middle of the mud. Position your boat out in the clear water and work your casts parallel to that seam. You'll be presenting your bait to fish that are set up and ready to ambush anything that crosses that line. Timing is a huge piece of this puzzle. These muddy shoreline spots aren't active 24/7. You have to know when they turn on. The absolute best time is often right after a major wind event. Let's say you had a strong south wind for 2 straight days. On the third day, the wind might switch or lay down completely, A lot of guys would think the bite is over. That's a huge mistake. It takes time for that muddy water to settle and clear. That third day, even with no wind, the north shorelines that were getting pounded are still going to be warm, muddy, and full of bait. This can be the best time to fish, as boat control is much easier. Another key window is the time of day. While you can catch fish all day in these conditions, the low light periods of morning and evening can be exceptional. The walleyes, already comfortable in the murky water, become even more bold and will push right up into a foot or two of water to feed. So, pay attention to the weather patterns. Don't fish a shoreline that just started getting wind an hour ago. Fish the ones that have been getting hit for a day or two. That's where the ecosystem has had time to set up. There's a very specific time of year when this pattern is at its absolute peak, and that's the post-spawn period. Think about what a walleye does after the rigors of spawning. They are exhausted, they are hungry, and they are looking for two things: the warmest water they can find to recover, and the easiest possible meal. Where do they find both of those things? You guessed it, on those shallow, wind-blown, muddy flats and shorelines. The spawn often takes place on cleaner, rockier shorelines, but as soon as they're done, they don't stick around. They make a beeline for these recovery zones. The water is a few degrees warmer, which helps their metabolism, and the massive concentration of baitfish provides an effortless feeding opportunity. This is when you'll find the biggest fish of the year, those giant females, acting incredibly predictably. They aren't chasing baits in 20 feet of water. They are laying up in 3 feet of mud, soaking up the sun and inhaling any shiner that swims by. If you're fishing right after the spawn and you're still targeting deep, classic structures, you are in the wrong place. The giants have moved shallow. Here's a tough pill to swallow for the modern angler. When you're fishing these spots, you need to learn to ignore your expensive electronics. Turn off the side imaging. Don't even bother with the down imaging. In 2 to 4 feet of churned up, muddy water, your $100,000 sonar unit is basically useless. It can't separate the bottom from the sediment, and it certainly can't mark fish that are hugging the bottom in that chaos. This is old school fishing. It's about reading the wind, reading the shoreline, and trusting the pattern. A lot of guys can't handle this. They feel naked without their electronics telling them where the fish are. They'll pull up to a spot like this, see a blank screen and leave, convinced there's nothing there. This is a massive psychological advantage for you. While everyone else is out staring at their screens, looking for perfect little arches in 20 feet of water, you'll be casting to unpressured, aggressive fish that will never show up on a graph. This is about trusting your knowledge of fish behavior, not your technology. Okay, let's talk about what to throw. This is critical. Since the walleyes are using their lateral line more than their eyes, your lure selection needs to be all about vibration and water displacement. You want a bait that thumps, rattles, and pushes a lot of water. This is prime time for crankbaits, but not just any crankbait. Leave the subtle finesse baits in the box. You want something with a wide, aggressive wobble. Think of classic baits like the original Rapala shad wrap, or a Berkeley flicker shad, or a bandit. These baits have a hard, thumping action that sends out massive vibrations. Another fantastic choice is a lipless crankbait, a rattle bait. The sound and vibration from these are second to none in dirty water. And don't forget about paddle tail swim baits on a jig head. A 3 or 4 inch swim bait with a big boot tail puts out a constant rhythmic pulse that walleyes just can't ignore. The key here is to forget about being subtle. You need to announce your bait's presence and make it easy for the fish to track it down. Now for the age-old question, what about color? In this dirty water, is color even a factor? The answer is yes, but not in the way you might think. You're not trying to match the hatch with a hyper-realistic perch pattern. You're trying to create contrast and visibility. There are 2 schools of thought here, and both work. The first is to go bright and obnoxious. Think chartreuse, fire tiger, hot orange. These bright, loud colors can catch whatever available light there is and create a flash or a glow that helps a walleye zero in for the final strike. The other school of thought is to go with dark, solid colors. Think black, dark purple, or a solid dark brown. Why would that work? Because it creates a sharp, distinct silhouette. Against the lighter, brown, murky water, a solid black bait stands out like a sore thumb. It creates a target that's easy for the fish to see as it gets close. My advice? Have both. Start with something bright, like a fire tiger crankbait. If you're not getting bites, switch to a solid black paddle tail. Don't overthink it. The goal is simply to be seen. Let's discuss retrieve speed, because this is where so many anglers get it wrong. Their instinct is to cast out and burn the bait back to the boat, trying to cover water and trigger a reaction strike. That is the exact opposite of what you should be doing here. Remember, these walleyes are in a relaxed, opportunistic feeding mood. They aren't looking to chase down a meal moving at lightning speed. You need to slow everything down, way, way down. When you're fishing a crankbait, a slow, steady retrieve is key. You want that bait to be thumping and wobbling, but barely moving forward, just fast enough to feel the bait working. For a swim bait on a jig, it's even slower. Cast it out, let it hit the bottom, and then just slowly crawl it back. Painfully slow. Lift the rod tip, move the bait a foot, then let it fall and sit for a few seconds. Most of your bites will come on the pause, when the bait is just sitting there. You have to give the fish time to feel the vibration, move in to investigate, and then eat it. If you think you're reeling too slow, slow down even more. Stealth is a word you don't often associate with fishing in heavy wind and muddy water, but it is absolutely critical. Just because the water is cloudy doesn't mean you can be loud and clumsy. These fish are in very shallow water, sometimes less than 2 feet. They are highly sensitive to noise and vibrations transmitted through the water and the lake bed. This means you have to approach these spots with care. Use your trolling motor, not your big engine, to get into position. Try to stay as far away from the bank as you can while still being able to make an effective cast. When you're moving around in the boat, walk softly. Don't drop pliers on the floor or slam compartment lids shut. Every one of those unnatural sounds sends a shockwave through the water that will alert every fish in the area to your presence. The wind and wave noise provides some cover, but a sharp, metallic clang is a universal danger signal. Behave like you're sight fishing for bonefish on a calm flat. The quiet angler is the one who gets bit. We have to talk about boat control. This is the skill that separates the consistently successful angler from the person who just gets lucky once in a while. Fishing a windblown bank is challenging. The wind is pushing your boat where you don't want it to go. You can't just drift aimlessly. You need to maintain a precise distance from the shore and a specific speed. This is where a good bow mount trolling motor with a spot lock or anchor mode feature is worth its weight in gold. You can use it to hold your position in the wind, allowing you to fan cast and thoroughly cover an area. Or you can use it to meticulously slip along the shoreline, moving slowly with the wind but controlling your drift. If you don't have a spot lock, you'll need to master back trolling or pointing your bow into the wind and using bursts from the trolling motor to hold your position and move laterally down the bank. It's not easy, and it takes practice. But if you can't control your boat, you can't effectively present your lure to the fish. It's that simple. How you cast and present the lure is just as important as which lure you choose. Simply bombing a cast straight towards the bank is inefficient and often ineffective. You need to think strategically. The best approach is to position your boat parallel to the shore and make your casts at a 45-degree angle ahead of the boat. Retrieve the lure back and then make your next cast a little further down the bank. This fan casting approach allows you to cover the shoreline methodically. The key benefit here is that your lure spends the maximum amount of time in the strike zone. If you cast straight to the bank, your lure is in that 2 to 4 foot sweet spot for only a few seconds before it's out in deeper water. By casting at an angle, your crankbait or swimbait is grinding along the bottom in that prime territory for almost the entire retrieve. You are essentially trolling a specific depth zone with your casting, ensuring any walleye holding there gets a good, long look at your offering. Here is a pro-level tip that most people will never figure out on their own. I call it the do-nothing retrieve. It works best with a shallow diving floating-style crankbait like an original Rapala. The wind and waves are already creating a ton of motion and current in the water. You can use that to your advantage. Cast your lure out, reel it down until you feel it just tick the bottom, and then stop. Just stop reeling. Let the lure sit there on a semi-slack line. The wave action will be pulling and jerking your line, which in turn imparts a subtle, erratic, and incredibly natural action to the crankbait. It will dart and pause and roll, exactly like a disoriented baitfish struggling in the current. Every 10 or 15 seconds, give the reel handle one single, slow turn to pull the bait forward a few feet, and then pause again. This technique requires patience, but it is absolutely deadly because you are letting Mother Nature present the bait for you. It looks more natural than anything you could ever do with your rod tip. You have to be ready for the bite, because it's not going to be what you expect. In deep, clear water, a walleye bite is often a sharp tick or a solid thump. You feel it right up through the rod handle. In this shallow, muddy water, the bite is usually much different. Because you're retrieving so slowly and the fish are often just inhaling the bait as it goes by, the bite feels mushy or heavy. A lot of times, you'll simply feel the weight of the fish. Your lure will be thumping along and then the thumping will just stop, and your line will feel heavy like you snagged a plastic bag. That's a fish. Other times, especially with a crankbait, the bite will feel like your lure just ran into a soft patch of mud. There's no jarring strike. The key is to be a line watcher. Pay attention to any unusual jump, twitch, or sideways movement in your line. At the slightest hint of something different, reel down, feel for weight, and set the hook with a long sweeping motion, not a violent jerk. You'll be surprised how many of those snags start pulling back. Let me tell you a quick story about the day this all clicked for me. For years, I was that guy. I ran from dirty water. Then one day, after a 3-day blow, I was struggling. The whole lake was a mess. I was about to pack it in when I saw an old-timer in a small aluminum boat just sitting off a muddy, garbage-strewn point. He wasn't even moving, just casting. I watched him for about 5 minutes, and in that time he landed 2 beautiful walleyes, probably 5 or 6 pounds each. I couldn't believe it. I idled over trying to be respectful and just asked what he was doing. He just smiled and pointed at the water with his rod. He said, "The pantry's open, but everyone else is afraid to get their feet dirty." That one sentence changed my entire approach. He explained that all the baitfish get stacked up on these shores, and the big walleyes just lay there and eat. I re-rigged with a noisy crankbait, went to a similar-looking shoreline down the lake, and proceeded to have the best day of walleye fishing of my entire life up to that point. It proved to me that sometimes the best spots are the ones that our own prejudice tells us to avoid. Let's be real for a minute. The biggest obstacle to fishing this way isn't finding the right lure or the right spot. It's the psychological barrier in your own head. It goes against everything we've been taught. It feels wrong. You'll pull up to a spot that looks lifeless, you'll make 20 casts without a bite, and that little voice in your head will start nagging you. "This is stupid, there are no fish here. Go back to that nice rocky point where you caught one last year." You have to have the confidence to ignore that voice. You have to trust the process. You have to understand the why behind the pattern. Know that the warmth is there. Know that the bait is there. Therefore, the walleyes have to be there. This isn't a technique for impatient anglers. It's a game of persistence. You might have to hit 3 or 4 muddy shorelines before you find the one that's loaded, but when you do, the reward is worth it. You have to break the habit of running to pretty-looking spots and commit to fishing ugly. Finally, we need to know when this pattern is not the right call. It's not a magic bullet that works all the time. How do you know when to give up and try something else? There are a few key signs. First, look at the bait. If you fish a productive-looking shoreline for 30 minutes and you don't see a single sign of life, no minnows skipping on the surface, no birds diving, nothing, it might be a dead zone. Sometimes, for whatever reason, the bait just doesn't set up on a particular shore. Second, pay attention to water temperature. If you check the temp on the wind-blown shore and it's the same or even colder than the main lake, the pattern probably isn't active. This can happen in the heat of summer or late fall. This is primarily a spring and early summer tactic. And finally, if the water is too muddy, like pure, thick mud, where visibility is literally zero, it can be too much of a good thing. You want stained or murky, not solid. If you've tried several prime-looking spots with confidence and are getting zero feedback, it's okay to switch gears. But at least you'll have given it an honest shot. So, let's bring it all home. We've been taught our whole lives to look for the perfect spot, the scenic, clear water, classic calendar picture location. But the game-changing revelation, the aha moment, is that the biggest, most aggressive walleyes in the system are often doing the exact opposite. They are using chaos to their advantage. They are leveraging muddy water for cover, warmer temperatures for energy, and wind-driven currents as a conveyor belt for food. The single most important takeaway from this is to stop letting your eyes fool you. That shoreline you've been avoiding your entire life because it looks unfishable and ugly is very likely the most untapped trophy goldmine on your lake. This isn't just a random tip, it's a fundamental shift in how you should view a body of water. It's about understanding the why behind fish location, not just the where. Thank you so much for watching and for being willing to challenge the old ways of thinking. If this video gave you a new perspective, do me a favor and hit that like button. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on more tips that will genuinely put more fish in your boat. And now I want to hear from you. What's the single ugliest or most unlikely spot you've ever caught a trophy fish? Drop your story in the comments below. I'd love to read them.